Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and friends of Baylor. Before we start today, I wanted to call your attention to a really, really terrific guest essay in the New York Times by Jessica Steyer, and it is called "The Playbook Used to Prove Vaccines Cause Autism," and it's really, really worth reading. Not too long, and goes through all the data as to all the misinformation about vaccines and autism. And the reason this was written is because Secretary Kennedy announced a big attempt to understand the causes of autism, which is a great thing to do, highly thoughtful. And so the anti-vaccine world has a long history of misinformation. It all started with Andrew Wakefield, who's a British doctor who published a study in 1998 that linked the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella, to autism. He was found to falsify data, receive funding from lawyers in lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers, and that paper that was published, I think, in The Lancet was retracted, and he was barred from practicing medicine in Britain, but he already did a huge amount of harm. And shortly after that paper was published, the vaccine number dropped a lot in Britain. Since then, there have been some 70 studies, 43 high-quality peer-reviewed papers that showed no link to vaccines and autism, and 26 that showed some link. Two-thirds of the 26 papers were authored by the father-son team of the Geyers and have been heavily criticized for deceptive research. Of the other 8 that were not published by those two, 4 were retracted, and the others were thought to have data manipulation. The recent events have been to target adjuvants or additives to vaccines. Wakefield targeted thimerosal in the MMR vaccine. It was already really removed from most vaccines. You recall I mentioned that one of the early things that Kennedy decided to do is remove thimerosal from the flu vaccine, which is almost not ever in any of the flu vaccines in the U.S. It was used for multi-dose vials and never been shown to actually cause autism. There is aluminum additives that are as an adjuvant, and that has now sort of been the focus of some of the anti-vaccine or vaccines cause autism thinking. And there was a Danish study that published in July of 1.2 million children over 13 years that showed no benefit, no effect of aluminum in producing autism. So the reason it's worth looking at this paper is it goes through some of the strategies by which people can manipulate data. It's not obvious, you sit there and, if you're not a scientist, go, well, of course it's science, it must be important. Well, here's a good example. If you look at a Swedish study, looked at the number of autism traits that were reported in the literature, and it really has been stable over years. But what did happen was in the late 90s, there were better definitions of what autism is for diagnostic purposes. And so even though the number of traits, in other words, the population didn't change, but the number of diagnoses increased because people were better at identifying autistic traits in kids and identifying as such. And so when you can see, for example, the definition of autism changed, and you can see the number of people who were diagnosed with autism. Well, this is a good example of one of those studies that were published that are misleading. The authors here use this to say hepatitis B vaccine causes autism. Well, they used as a control 2 years of the time before autism diagnostics were changed. So and they used as the study population those afterwards. Well, anything increased after that. So you could be wearing brown shoes, and that would be that would be a cause of autism based on that kind of bad science. So the point is, there's a lot of misinformation, misleading that looks like a scientific paper, but really is poor and either been retracted or criticized or not peer-reviewed. And right now, the person leading the major study in autism in the United States is one of those authors. What are you going to do? Okay. Happy to know the Houston Chronicle has now officially declared the state measles outbreak is over. I love it when people declare victory. It reminds me of like mission accomplished. The problem is, yes, the outbreak, which is defined by a person leading to 3 cases or more, it burned out in the state of Texas, but we are still susceptible. It's like, this forest fire is burned out, but we're still in a drought. So because we have too few people vaccinated, all it takes is one new exposure from Europe or Canada or someplace where if someone's exposed to measles, that you have another outbreak. So I'd say the current problem is it looks like it's waned, but we are still very susceptible as a country because we're below 95%. So as you recall, it infected 762 people in Texas. It's been more than 42 days since the last case, so they're officially declaring it over. Two unvaccinated kids in Texas died, and there have been a total of 1,356 cases in the United States. But if you look at the Americas, Canada down to Mexico, more than 10,000 cases in the Americas. 18 of them were fatal, and they've been reported in 10 different countries. And the pace of infection this year was 34 times more than any before. If you look at it, the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, is urging all the countries to increase their vaccination. You got to be above 95%. But in our region, Canada reported the highest total with 4,500 cases, followed by Mexico with 3,900, and the United States with 1,300. Many countries in South America also had cases. Worldwide, there have been 240,000 cases, with the Mediterranean and Europe being very high, and Africa. So, there's so many cases now in Europe or Africa. If you're traveling around the country with a child that's not vaccinated, you're going to expose your kid to measles. And so it's very important that you are up to date. So COVID is late summer. We talked about the potential surge. You can see test positivity is increasing, emergency room visits are increasing, and in wastewater in all parts of the country, you can see a dramatic increase. Most of the increases in the West Coast, but Texas and Florida, Alabama are very high as well. Texas sort of leads the way. If you look at the region, South region and national compared to Texas, Texas is really high. And of course, in our community in Harris County, there's a lot. So in Texas and in our neighborhood, if someone comes in with an upper respiratory infection, someone called me yesterday. I had to cancel a lunch today, and the first thing I said is go test for COVID, waiting to see if they're positive. But wouldn't be surprised. Now the flu season is going to be underway in October, so there are a lot of updates on what's coming up in the flu season. The CDC has recommended that anyone over the age of 6 months be vaccinated. Now this to me is crazy. I mean, it's very good. But with COVID, they said only if you're over 65 at risk. So it makes no sense when COVID is killed more people than flu and is more infectious, and yet, I don't know. My feeling is anybody 6 months or over should get COVID and flu shots. I mentioned before that thimerosal has been removed from those rare multi-dose vials for this upcoming season. There are a couple of different formulations. Flu Mist has been approved. Flu Mist is a live attenuated influenza vaccine. So it's adapted to grow only in cold, doesn't grow at high temperatures. And so you inhale it through your nose. It only replicates in the tip of your nose. That can be given for people who are either at home or are afraid of needles, but it's generally a very effective treatment. They've recommended the same composition as last year, H1N1, H3N2, and also the Victoria lineage influenza B. Yamagata has disappeared. The other influenza B has not been around since COVID came. And then there's one other new formulation called Flu Block that Sanofi has developed, and it's a recombinant. So generally, the way the vaccines are produced is the virus is adapted to grow either in eggs or cells, and then is isolated, killed, and then given to you as a vaccine. This new method is a recombinant DNA molecule, produces the antigens, and then it's harvested. In some ways, it's kind of similar to the mRNA vaccine. In the mRNAs in people, you end up producing the protein that induces an immune response. In this case, a recombinant method produces the protein, and that becomes the vaccine. And when looked at compared to others, it's pretty effective. So I'd if you can get Flu Block, it looks pretty effective. I'd probably do that if you had one. But any flu vaccine works. And then finally, we always like to follow the Olympic Games. Last time we followed the Olympic Games, as you recall, We call them the COVID games because mostly I was following the number of COVID cases that developed during the Olympics. Well, there's a new set of games in China right now called the Humanoid robot games. And this is exciting stuff. There's exhibition events, competition events, and there's like races, and there's, I saw a soccer match where all these robots are running around, and mostly they just fall down. So I know in someday soon we will all be replaced by robots, but if you want to feel good about, being a human, watch the humanoid robot games, because those robots are not doing very well. Anyway, I want to end today with a bunch of shout outs. First of all, congratulations to the faculty, staff, and students at the DeBakey High School for Health Professions. It ranked among the top 10 high schools in Texas, remains among the best in the country based on U.S. News and World Report best high school rankings. The Texas Education Agency also released ratings of Texas schools this week, and Baylor's middle schools and high schools throughout Texas received strong rankings for their performance. Very, very proud of the schools that we are helping create their curriculum. On August 15th, our 225 first-year medical students in Houston and Temple received their white coats in a formal ceremony, symbolizing the students' dedication to learning and the practice of medicine and their commitment to the patients they will serve. Congratulations to all of you who put on your white coats, and I hope you feel the weight of those white coats with the responsibility to take care of people. It's not all fun and games, as my sister will tell you. And finally, congratulations to Dr. Aquino-Lopez, an instructor in the Department of Pediatrics, Hematology, Oncology, who received the St. Baldrick's Scholar Grant from the St. Baldrick's Foundation for Osteosarcoma Research. So she will use an artificial virus combination to modify cancer cells in the hope of triggering immune responses to eliminate cancerous ones. Again, I mentioned mRNA technology is very often used in these kinds of studies, and it's now been banned. I assume she's not doing that. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I can't wait to see you next week.